Computer. Okay. All right. So adrenal glands are responsible for a lot more than stress. And I remember you mentioning that. Were you aware that they were even part of the stress response? Or like, did you have any clue of what adrenals did
I
before?
didn't know they existed.
Okay. Okay. Fair
So I'm
enough.
very happy to be familiar with them and have met them now.
Yeah. Hello, adrenals.
Hi.
Okay. So a lot of people, if anybody does know anything about them, it's usually the knowledge is like it's responsible for stress response. But they are involved in blood sugar regulation, your hormone balance, especially sex hormones. So like testosterone, estrogen, like mineral corticoids, which are going to be aldosterone. So if you have like fluid balance issues, you might also have some adrenal function issues, stress handling, obviously, fluid balance issues, sleep quality and timing, energy production, and sex hormone production. So, they respond to stressors and regulate each of these systems through a feedback system called the HPA axis, remember, which I remember was you were really excited to hear about. So, HPA axis. So examples of hormones produced by the adrenal glands, we talked about that: estrogen, testosterone, cortisol, adrenaline, noradrenaline, which is basically adrenaline, but for more like nerve, like smooth muscle tissues, and aldosterone. You will not be tested on this. Those are
These are good to
so
know.
the role of cortisol is actually for blood sugar regulation. So it's called a glucocorticoid for glucose. So it's involved in glucose metabolism. The strange thing about cortisol is it's used in times of stress. And the reason for that is its function is to get energy production rolling. And so technically, it comes down to glucose metabolism, but the reason for it is to help you fight stress. And so when things like blood sugar are low, it becomes a stressor. So we'll talk about that in a minute, but that's kind of the relationship. We think of cortisol as being this stress hormone, and it is, but the reason it is that is because it's in charge of starting the ball rolling for glucose metabolism in order to give you energy to flee a bear. Um,
Could I
so
grab my
that,
notepad real quick?
yep,
Sorry. Just a moment.
no worries.
Okay. That's a good thing to note about cortisol because I don't think that I think it just gets the rep of the stress hormone and there's a lot more
Yeah,
to it.
there's a lot more to it. And I'm going to be sending you these slides also, so you'll be able to have some PDF form that you can download and save if you need to review them.
Great.
I'm a note taker, so I get it.
Helps me learn.
Yeah. And so part of that, I wanted to add to that too, is like part of that. So it's responsible for that blood sugar regulation and starting energy production, but that's why it's also necessary that it's highest in the morning and lowest at night. And that's where we're going to be talking about circadian rhythm, because in the morning it's just going to naturally get higher because we need to start our day. Um, and at night it needs to be lower so we can finish our day. All right. So this is what optimal cortisol levels should do. So there's various tests out there. Um, the one I really like will test cortisol the moment you wake up, 30 minutes after you wake, and then 60 minutes, and then throughout the day for like a few hours at a time. And this is ideally what we want it to look like. This is when cortisol starts to kind of wake you up. And then 30 minutes after waking is when it should be like at its highest. And it's a big spike. It's like, oh, we are ready to go. And then it starts to fall. And then it kind of sort of levels out a little bit. It falls more slowly throughout the day. But this is what we really want. And so for some people, what that ends up looking like, for instance, if we work out in the afternoons, we get these cortisol spikes here. Or for
Mm.
someone who catches their second wind in the evening, this level is higher right here. And you can see how that would make sleep difficult. We'll get into this more in module 2, but even looking at your 2 a.m. time when you're waking up, that's when blood sugar is low. And that's when your body's going to react with cortisol and say, hey, wake up. We need some blood sugar support. We'll get more into that in the next module. But giving you an idea of where your cortisol levels should be optimally in order to support that good rhythm. Energy production relies on the presence of cortisol to stimulate the release of triglycerides from fat tissue to be converted to glucose. So they trigger the pulling of stored forms of glucose. They're like, we need to pull this component over here so that we can convert it into glucose in order to make energy. It's going to stimulate the conversion of glycogen. So that is the stored form of glucose that's stored in the liver. So you have triglycerides in your fat, and then you have glycogen in the liver. Those are both storage forms of glucose. And so cortisol says, let's pull these things out of storage and convert them to glucose. And then it increases insulin secretion. So in order to get glucose into cells for energy production, we need insulin to do that. It's sort of an escort for it. It unlocks the door and gets it inside. If your body is triggered into making energy around 1 to 2 a.m., this is you. You can see why this would wake you up and make it difficult to fall back asleep. So, and that could, more than likely, it's probably a blood sugar issue. And over time, as we go through this, you're going to probably see that regulate. If you don't, then that's where we need a little bit more specific support. That's where it might be good to be looking at your glucose levels and finding out how your body's responding to blood sugar in general, or to foods in regards to blood sugar. The HPA axis, I actually love talking about the HPA axis. It's so helpful to know. And it's also it overlaps with a lot of other systems. So the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland are also parts of structures like the thyroid. So we have the HPT axis, which is a similar feedback loop. It's the hypothalamus, the pituitary, and the thyroid. There's these kind of several of them that overlap that are all really involved. So you can see if there's any dysfunction in the hypothalamus or pituitary component, you're also going to have issues with these other feedback systems and other organs. But we're going to focus on HPA. So hypothalamus, pituitary, adrenal, and it's just a constant feedback. The brain senses a stressor, tells the pituitary, hey, we need you to send out for help. Pituitary sends for help from the adrenal. And then once the hypothalamus then senses that the stressor is gone, that should stop. That's ideal. That's what our bodies are supposed to do. And you'll see as we get further in here that the problem is when the stressor hasn't stopped, it keeps going. So acute stressors might be a car accident, a physical injury, low blood sugar, over-exercising, an instance of violence, things that are very kind of like sudden and in the moment are very stressful. And more chronic stressors that we may not consider stress would be having things like gut pathogens. Bacteria, candida, parasites are very resilient and sneaky. A poorly balanced diet will cause stress on that HPA axis. Overworking, just having this constant, like, I always have to be climbing the ladder, I always have to be working, I always have to be meeting deadlines. Relationship stressors, commute, work deadlines, negative self-talk for someone who is really hard on themselves for a lot of things. Hi, that's me. That can be a chronic stressor because it's hard to shut that off. Caffeine consumption, that is not a problem that you have, it sounds like. toxins in foods, water, air, skin products. And I know you're working on that. You've been working on that for a while,
Mhm.
reducing those things. Managing a busy schedule. I mean, with kids, work, school, that's hard, but it still is stress. And so just being aware of it is important. People pleasing behaviors, when we have people who have a really hard time saying no to things or overcommitting, that's a lot of stress on them because typically it also involves like a fear of, they feel like they're in danger if they say no, but also they're too busy. It's kind of two-sided. So people pleasing behaviors are often, I would consider them chronic stress. Forgetting to eat, people who are too busy to forget to eat, that messes with your blood sugar, that messes, that puts your body into this like stressed mode because they're wondering where it's going to get its nourishment from, and effects of past or current traumas.
I did a
Um,
toddler training module with like expert folks who have studied toddlers. And one of the things they said is when your kid is like screaming at you or like just like crying, your body actually goes into fight or flight mode. And I was like, well, that makes me feel better because like it does sometimes feel so intense that it's just like my body, I can just feel like getting tense and stressed out. But like with this whole piece, it makes a lot of sense because while they are wonderful and very good for many other reasons, I do think my body is going into fight or flight mode when they have those breakdowns. And Kellen is very, very emotional right now, which is understandable. He's at that time, and that's just kind of his persona right now. But I feel like that's a stressor that is bigger than I would think, and that ties into the information that you gave me this week.
yeah, it's like understanding why that happens. And that's not something you can turn off, right? You can't just stop Kellen from expressing what he needs because that's the only way he knows how to express it and it affects you.
Yeah.
And you can't stop that from happening. So I think it's just good to know these things so that we're aware of like, okay, how do we come back down from this? How do we switch back into rest and digest? How do we regulate our nervous system? How do we regulate his nervous system? So you're right. I think this is really just good to be aware of. It's like I'm not going to tell people to stop having stress. It's like there are things you can say no to, and your child reacting is not one of those. So I'm glad you recognize that. So yeah, here's our sympathetic and parasympathetic, just like you were talking about. We have this fight or flight and this rest and digest. Freeze, the freeze response is also part of the parasympathetic nervous system, which is interesting because I know in my world I tend to freeze under certain kinds of stress. So usually when I'm like fearful of something. So it is interesting to me that that's along the parasympathetic line. I once heard a really interesting, I'll try to keep this really short, description from a somatic practitioner that helped to illustrate what it looked like in animals who have these same nervous systems, but they don't carry the trauma in their bodies like we do. And so what they do, so you think about a rabbit being hunted by a wolf or a coyote or something, the rabbit senses danger and freezes, and it plays dead. Its body does it on its own. It's not doing it on purpose. It's what its body is doing. It shuts everything down. The wolf comes over wanting to make the kill itself, and so it's not interested. It kind of pokes around at it. It's like, this rabbit's already dead, I don't want it. And then it leaves, and a few minutes later, nervous system comes back to life. The rabbit goes, kind of shakes it off, and then just runs away. It doesn't remember that even happened. It's a really interesting perspective of like, that's what a wild animal does, but humans are different. Humans like hold on to some stuff. We don't often finish our stress response.
Mm.
And so we carry it with us in our tissues. Um, all right, so how your nervous system responds to stress. We're going to go over the sympathetic nervous system first. We have it increases blood flow to large muscles like the heart, lungs, and leg muscles, because those are the muscles needed to flee a wolf or a tiger or, to survive. Increases insulin levels to produce more energy. We talked about that a little bit. Stops or slows factors involved in anything not needed for, I think I meant fighting or fleeing danger. So digestion and tissue healing would be two of those factors that they're not necessary when you're fighting a tiger. And so being in sympathetic nervous system actually shuts down those functions. Parasympathetic, smooth muscle activation. So muscles that move food through your intestines for digestion. That's what it's activating. Digestive enzyme production. It's prioritizing digestion. It prioritizes tissue healing, which this is also happening a lot while you sleep, when you're in that rested state. Any thoughts or question on these so far?
That sounds good.
Okay. All right, 3 things that are good to remember about the autonomic nervous system. We have parasympathetic and sympathetic cannot be simultaneously activated. When one shuts on, the other shuts off. Your body has not adapted to respond differently to different types of stressors. So whether it is Kellen's his reaction to something, his very emotional reaction to something, or if it's low blood sugar, your body is responding in the same way, because we have not yet figured out how to differentiate the types of stressors that those are. And chronic stress response can cause dysfunction in the components involved, including the HPA axis as a whole, and especially the adrenal glands. So over time, those chronic stressors, your adrenal glands will start to adapt to that chronic stress, which means they'll produce less cortisol and they get just sluggish and tired. Chronic stress response manifests as symptoms that can be misleading. So energy fluctuations, digestive symptoms, hangry symptoms. Do you get hangry? I don't remember if you get like the want to punch somebody, or like you say harsh things when you're hungry.
I feel like yes. Just overall in life. It's like if I don't eat, it's not a good situation.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely been there. So hangry is a sign of adrenal dysfunction. Being a night person, PMS, irregular periods, or other bleeding issues are all going to be supported by supporting your adrenal health. Dizziness or headaches. The hard part with migraines is you and I have talked about this, there's just so many different causes. So this could be playing a part in the fact that they've been so much more intense lately. And your sleep has been poor. This could be a very chicken and egg situation, but it's possible that if we start supporting your adrenals, you might start to see some improvement there. But those are hard because migraines are like so mysterious for everybody.
Everything triggers them. So don't do anything.
I'm in my 40s and I'm only kind of just starting to figure out what causes my migraine. And I've had them for most of my life.
Yes.
This is a really fun diagram of your blood sugar. So here's where, and like I said, we'll dive more into this in the next module, but here's a little visual for you of like how, and I'm not saying your diet is like this, but there's a lot of people who come to see me whose diet is, first thing is like coffee in the morning, and they might grab some breakfast while they're getting everything else ready, or they might grab something on the way to work. They're at work, they need a coffee break around like 10 a.m. Maybe they grab a little snack. Then they eat some lunch, they feel better. They have another kind of drop at like 2 p.m. in the afternoon. You remember those commercials, like that 2 o'clock feeling? It's very real. And then we go home, we make dinner. We might have like a late night snack and we go to sleep, and then we get this wake up at 1 or 2 in the morning because our blood sugar is low again. So a lot of that has more to do with diet, like using our diet to help our glucose levels just stay steady throughout the day. But this is what a lot of people's cortisol looks like. We have this these spikes. And so depending on the types of food that we eat, we have these like spikes in blood sugar, which cause more rapid drops. And so it's this constant just boof, 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 like we're bouncing up like on the walls instead of this kind of like steady like flow throughout the day, eating more protein, more fats, less refined food, that kind of thing. So chronic cortisol. So you talked about this. So, and I'm glad you noted that you understood that it was chronic cortisol release because cortisol in and of itself is anti-inflammatory. The problem is it's released for stress, which means when it's released, it's also stimulating like immune system factors and like tissue heal, like whatever it's needing to address. And that causes inflammation because we're getting our immune system involved. And we need inflammation for that. That's those white blood cells, the lymphatic cells that all come to our aid when things like that happen. So that's why chronic cortisol is pro-inflammatory. It causes inflammation. So some effects of that chronic cortisol release, suppressed immune system. So sometimes I see it in a suppressed immune system, the person who's like, I never get sick. And then there's the person who is always sick. So there's kind of some of both. It depends on where you're at in that adrenal dysfunction, whether your body is like overreacting to things or whether it's just kind of like, nope, we don't have enough for this. So we're just going to let it slide. Sex hormone imbalance. So if you have like estrogen symptoms or testosterone symptoms, whether low or high, the imbalance of those is going to show up. Weight gain by way of insulin resistance. So that constant up and down of your blood glucose is going to cause insulin to be, it will cause your cells to be less sensitive to insulin, which means it's not working as well to get the glucose into your cells and make energy. Increased inflammation decreases thyroid hormone activity at a cellular level. So chronic stress actually has the ability to deactivate thyroid hormones in order to preserve energy. So decreases appetite by reducing leptin and increasing ghrelin. So ghrelin is like, if you think of it like your stomach growling, is ghrelin, and that's the hormone that makes you hungry. Leptin is what tells us that we're full. Decreases digestive activity. So we're slowing down digestive processes. So we're probably having things like bloat, or we're more susceptible to gut pathogens in those cases also. And it affects sleep. We just keep coming back to sleep. You're like, that's what I want to know. Do you have thoughts or questions so far on any of that section?
The hormone regulation makes a lot of sense too, because I do tend to get a really more intense headache or migraine when I start my period. So I feel like with the shifts in hormones, that's also a really big part of my migraines. And so that piece would also, I think, tie in to what's going on.
Bingo. Yeah, you're spot on.
I'm gonna help
And those
myself
are,
in just one moment. I'll be back.
yeah,
I'm so sorry.
okay. That's okay. You're fine.
What you picked up? Probably fine. Sorry. Yes. So the
That's okay.
hormones definitely a thing with
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Mine are hormone related too. And it's especially like frustrating because in those moments, there's not a lot you can do. There's things you can do over time. And I think that's been the most frustrating for me. So, and they really take over your day. So I'm sorry that you experienced those.
I'm sorry you do too. It's very frustrating because, like you said, it's like once it gets you, it's really kind of too late. It's like,
Yeah,
okay,
you're like,
awesome.
okay, here we are.
Yeah.
How can I make this work today? Yeah. All right. So some of the takeaways, your adrenal glands do more than just respond to stress. Cortisol has a diurnal rhythm. So diurnal means like daily, that is largely impacted by light, diet, and stressors. Your body responds to most stressors as though you're fleeing a tiger, no matter what type the stressor is. The more frequently your adrenals have to respond to stress, the more tired they become and the less likely they are to function properly. And chronic cortisol release has a big impact on long term health. All right. And you've already started doing some of these. So I know the daylight. I was thinking about how you get up and first thing in the morning you guys are outside playing, and I think it would be good to get out there for 10 minutes, but I also think that you're already doing a good job of that. So I'm like, maybe that's not the thing she needs to focus on 100% of the time. I feel
It
like
needs
you
to be that window because is that related to the cortisol level? Do you want the sunlight at the same time that your cortisol is spiking?
that's
Is
ideal. What that it sort of just tells, it's a way of your body, your brain being able to recognize that like, oh, this is morning time. And
Mhm.
like if we can really regulate that happening first thing in the morning, then it makes the night easier. So yeah, it would be beneficial. I would say like you're already doing a good job. Or maybe I don't know how well the kids will do with this, but like maybe playtime is earlier or just going outside with your tea in the morning, like could be just as good.
Yeah.
It's the sun on your eyes. It's like your eyes are able to take that in and like sense it. It's harder during winter months, although you're in San Diego, so
Well,
it's
I do
probably
say light is super triggering for my headaches. And so I am always in
oh
sunglasses. And so when I take it in, I'm taking it in polarized doses. So
yeah. And that can be hard on things too. That is confusing to your brain. What I will say in this entire module, it's always going to come down to what works best for you. You're not always going to be able to do the number one best super awesome thing. You're going to have to figure out what works for your lifestyle and for your body. Um, so whatever you can figure out that works. Avoid coffee or caffeine on an empty stomach. You are already golden there, and turn off all screens 2+ hours before bedtime. Um, these are practices. The turning off the screens, that's a hard one because then we're kind of like, well, what do we fill our brains with? And I think like, well, what did we do 30, 40 years ago? Like, what were we doing before bed? So,
yeah, for real.
um, pretty sure as a kid, I was watching TV until super late at night. All right. So when we take action, we see results. We're going to get better sleep, better mood, better stress response. It will come. It will take some time, but it will come. Questions. Here's your and we actually still have time. I would say if we started around like 9:30, we still have some time for this. So I'm
Okay,
pumped
cool.
to hear what you've got.
Yeah, let me get those pulled up here. So I thought it was really interesting how the gut is related to the adrenal glands. So I'm guessing this is probably in future modules, so we can get to it later. But it must be a lot of dietary changes or more specific things that like can help our adrenal glands if we're eating certain things or avoiding certain things. Would that be correct?
Yes, and that is yes, and that is partly an individualized question. So some of that would come down to like knowing your body and what your body needs. A lot of it comes down to So I guess I wouldn't really be talking about gut health in this case. I would be talking more, this is more for blood sugar regulation, but eating more proteins, more fats, more greens. And when you do that, you're going to sort of naturally consume less refined grains, carbs. I'm not against carbs, but I do notice, and especially in, I don't know what you guys eat, but I notice this especially in vegetarian diets, it is just a lot harder to meet that criteria because your protein sources without animal products involve a lot more starch and carb heavy foods. So,
Mm.
starches and carbs are not bad inherently, but they do impact your blood sugar. And
Mhm.
so, making sure that we get more concentrated sources of good quality proteins and fats, and especially like greens are carbohydrates, but they're so not only they're nutrient dense, but they are so fiber heavy that they really slow down that metabolism of that spike of glucose. So when we start to eat more of those things, we also feel more full. And so you're not going to want to eat. You're gonna crowd out the other pieces if you're focusing on that, in other words. So you're not going to eat the same thing that you already eat, plus a chicken leg and a pile of salad. Like that's you're gonna be way too full probably. Um so yes, it does involve what you eat, and that will be one of the action steps in future modules to help regulate the blood sugar. So like first thing in the morning, if you're first, well, tell me what I remember you love oatmeal. Like I remember that being a thing that you eat a lot.
Yeah.
So like what is that still a thing for you, or what are you eating for breakfast these days?
I usually do sausage, the beef, grass-fed beef sausage.
Oh yeah, those
So
Tetons. We talked about those.
uh,
Okay.
the Tetons, and then I do eggs. And then the boys love waffles and pancakes, but I did get some sprouted whole grain flour, which I think is the one that lets your system go slowly, right? That's the one
Yes.
that it takes longer to digest. So fortunately, like we could start off the day strong with those things where I will say we do make some whipped cream and add some maple sugar to the whipped cream. So there's a problem with that.
Yeah.
And like I think
It's okay.
for the boys, that's probably okay because it's like not that much, but like probably for me, I'm like I probably should not start the day with anything sugar related, especially if I'm like having such a big issue with headaches. Um, but so we do those things, and then we also get the Ezekiel bread. So it's like the whole grains, and they like that. So I'm really glad that I found you like at a time when I feel like the kids were still like they were eating healthy and they were mostly on breast milk, but like it was a really good time to like introduce the even better stuff because we weren't eating the terrible stuff, but we weren't knowing what the great stuff was. So I feel
Yeah.
really fortunate because they do like the great stuff right now, fingers crossed. Um, we usually, and then like throughout the day, I think it gets harder to eat healthier, but we still have pretty high quality stuff. So yeah, so that's how I start my day with usually
Okay.
with food.
I'm curious too, when are you hungry next after that?
Usually it depends on if I'm paying attention to myself, which is
Let's say
not.
if you were paying attention to yourself. I get that.
If I was paying too much attention to myself, I'd probably want a snack like in like an hour and a half or 2 hours after I eat breakfast, which is
Okay.
we usually eat breakfast at like 9, so then we usually push it to like 12 to eat because we like go out and do something. But sometimes we'll have snacks in between that are fortunately there are some really great snacks that you can find, the Siete brand ones. So we stick with the ones that don't have a lot of the yucky ingredients. Some of them have cassava flour, so I'm wondering if that is not a great option for me. If that is a blood sugar spiker, that might be an issue. So then we usually eat lunch and we do sandwiches and good peanut butter that doesn't have the yucky stuff. We try to do fruits. I try to put out, these are the fruit bots. They are little
What?
robots. They are
I love that.
they are here from breakfast. They're supposed to you're supposed to make like cupcakes in them. They're called cake bots, but I just every
Oh, okay.
meal, you're like, okay. I
I
try to put
love
fruit
that.
or vegetables into them, which the dudes usually mostly like fruits right now. Jesse will do vegetables, but try to put out fruits all the time. Trying to do more vegetables. That's the other tricky thing is that I love salads and like fresh vegetables, and the dudes are not that into it. So I like do not prepare those things for myself because I'm already like I already made stuff for them. So that's definitely an area that I would love to get better at. And then at dinner, it gets the laziest because if I haven't prepared something, I'm like, oh, what's in here?
Hmm.
And there, I've got some really great recipes that if I've like made it and frozen it, or if I have time during the day to make, it can work out really good. But I'd say dinner is definitely the harder one to nail.
Like the day is already active, you're there, you just know you're hungry, something needs to happen.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
it's like, well, do I have the capacity to make something real, which takes a lot longer as it should. All the good things that we actually can consume should take a longer time to
yeah,
make.
yeah.
But yeah, for dinner, I feel like we usually just do something out of the freezer that's not ideal. So
Hmm.
yeah. And sometimes like a
Well, and
class.
that's the nice thing about you having already done the kitchen detox is because at least you have a base knowledge of, and I'm spending more individual time with you on this just because I can. So I hope it's okay that it's probably not what I will do when I have a group of people in here, but I love doing this for you. It helps you, that the whole purpose of that is so that you know what you can grab. I mean, if it like in an ideal world, we would all be eating whole foods and cooking from scratch every single day, but good Lord, who has time for that? Like that is just not feasible. I have a pretty slow life and I don't have, it's not that I don't even have time for it. I don't have the capacity for it. Um, it is hard to do that. So the kitchen detox workshop helps you to make the better choice. It helps you to say, like, oh, I can have this in my freezer and it's there and it nourishes our bodies and it's not full of toxins. It may not be the best thing, but it's going to suit our needs for now. So I want you to give yourself credit for that because I think that is really important. But it's also good that you recognize like we can do better. I am curious if like adding some greens to your breakfast will help to make you feel a little bit fuller for a longer period of time, like sauteed greens, fresh greens, mixing them up every like I try to go for seasonal stuff. So like right now there's like a lot of dandelion greens and um I tasted for it's probably not the first time. I think I had it a while ago, but kohlrabi. Have you ever had kohlrabi? It is
No.
okay, it is like I want to show it to you. Do I have a second? I can run to my fridge really quick. Okay.
Get that kohlrabi.
Get the kohlrabi. Okay, this is my new favorite spring vegetable. It's a little wilty because it's been in our fridge for a while. These are like little cabbages. They're like sweet purple cabbages. And then the other
What?
day, I used the greens. I chopped them up and I used them for a couple of my breakfasts where I would saute them and do some eggs. And what my breakfasts are usually some kind of greens and then maybe some kind of eggs or leftover protein from the night before or something like that. So, and they were so good. They're a little tough. So you have to like, if you're going to saute them, either finely chop them or saute them a little longer than you would like spinach. Um, but my new favorite spring vegetable is kohlrabi.
Kohlrabi.
Like just
How
try
cool.
something new. Maybe take the boys to the farmer's market, let them pick out a vegetable. And if you ever, well, you do come up here with the boys, but if you guys ever pop into PCC, they do, they give kids a free produce. So, like, if a kid wants an apple or a stick of broccoli, kids are not going to eat that.
Great.
Like, so that's kind of fun. Then they can pick out what they want. But anyways, I got excited about that. But like I do think that it could be helpful for you to add maybe some greens. Like eating multiple times a day isn't necessarily a problem if you're eating good quality stuff. And if your body is hungry, I want you to listen to that. But when we can like be hungry for longer periods of time between, that's going to help gut health.
Okay. So
It's going to help that
snacking
blood
would
sugar issue.
be better. Less snacking would actually be better because in my mind, for some reason, I would think that like if you keep food in there that is like actually good food, it would regulate the blood sugar. But anytime you introduce food, does it spike it and stuff? So it's better to do less eating.
It depends on the person,
Mm-hmm.
is what that comes down to. Um, we'll get more into this in the next module too, but there's something called the migrating motor complex. And what that is it only happens during times when you are hungry, and it helps to sweep out like bacteria where it's not supposed to be. Like we need to be hungry sometimes. What we don't want is low blood sugar symptoms. And so, what I would say is if you're finding yourself hungry more often and you're needing to snack more often, I would want to look at the balance of nutrients that you're taking in at each meal. So it's not necessarily a bad thing. You are correct. It would regulate things, but depending on what you're eating in those times, you might still be spiking it and having it fall. Whereas if we have the protein and greens first thing in the morning, it might help you last until lunch, allowing that migrating motor complex to work better. And that's one less little spike that you have throughout the day.
Yeah.
So I always want you to listen to your body. If you need something, eat something. But if that helps you, it's very individual. It really depends on the person. And then I think for you, you already sort of um, recognize maybe a need for like, how do we make dinner happen in a better way? Like, when I can help you, I can give you ideas, but most of them just involve maybe spending a couple hours on like I had some friends who usually did it on a Sunday on a like while the kids they had two young kids and while the kids were napping, they would like prep as much of their food for the week as they could. And so they would make it so that dinners were easier to either the dinner was made and they just had to pull it out of the freezer, or everything was like portioned out and all they had to do was put it together, you know. There's things like that that you can do. Most of it just does involve taking a couple more hours out of your week to see if you can meal prep a little bit more.
Yeah. And I'm not working as much now, so that's going to be a lot easier to do. And Gavin's going to be off work now too, so there's going to be a lot more flexibility with time. Whereas before it was like any kid free time was just like get on the laptop and get the work done. So we're in a better season to do meal prep now.
Good. And if you weren't, this would be a lot harder, right? We would just have to be okay with the Costco freezer meal because that's the best option for you in that moment. So, and those are not bad things. Like I think you're doing better than you were, and that's good. So, um, does that answer your gut health question that you were talking about
Yes. Yeah.
dietarily? Okay. What else have you
Um,
got?
if I have the blue light setting on my phone, is it still counts as like messing with my circadian rhythm if I'm on my phone before bed? Is that a bunch of
I
nonsense?
it kind of there's a little bit to it, but I have not looked into the research for this, but I would venture to guess it's still going to be light stimulation in your face, blue light or not. It is better that it's a warmer light. Um, but having light that stimulates your face and your eyes like that late at night is really what's the harmful piece.
Mhm.
So, I mean, even if you think about like lights around our home, we have so much electricity. Um, they actually make smart lights now that are really cool we had a friend whose whole house was set to just dim the lights and turn them to a warmer tone at sundown. So it's like at night we're like, well, I need to be able to see. And so we have the lights on in the kitchen and then, in all these rooms. But even that, I'm not saying go turn all your lights off. But if you think about what life used to be like before electricity, it was kind of like, well, everything was candlelight. Imagine how well those people probably slept, was because they had these, like, when the sun was up was when they were up. They're like, okay, the sun's up, it's time to get up, it's time to, work the farm or like whatever it is we're doing. And then at night we have candlelight, and so everything gets dimmed down. And so I think that is more along our natural rhythm of things.
Yeah.
So
Well, we
yeah.
have a window right above our bed, and our neighbors keep their lights on, and we don't have really good like window coverings. So I'm also wondering if that might be a problem with why I'm waking up, is because I'm super photosensitive, obviously, when having migraines and otherwise. So I'm like, I'm already probably super sensitive to that. And then
Mhm.
if my body like maybe like stirs a little bit and like senses that much light coming in, it's probably not helping. So
Yeah.
some window coverings would be a good suggestion for myself.
Mhm. I think in an ideal world, like, we would install, I've seen these magical, they're basically hidden, they're super low profile and they cover the entire window, like all seams, but it's just a slide that comes across and it's blackout. It's not just a covering, it's like total blackout.
Oh, wow.
Mike sees them a lot in Korea. I'm like, that would be so great to
Yes.
have. Yeah,
Yes.
because I mean, light in your bedroom during the day is so nice, but yeah, when it's, we have the same exact issue. Our neighbor often has his backlight on, and our window faces his yard, and they always have like a fire and music and stuff at night. So it does make it hard. So, and we do have blinds that are like wooden, so they do block it out pretty well. So, I mean, that could be an option for you. But yeah, getting some kind of window covering. Sleep masks can also help with that. If you're not able to do the window covering, a sleep mask is a pretty easy, just
Have
pop
you
one
found
off
one
of
that's
Amazon.
comfortable? Have you tried them? Like sometimes I just can't like handle something on my face.
You and Mike are the same like, I typically sleep pretty well. So
Good.
it doesn't bother me a lot. So I don't really need a sleep mask. I have heard that weighted sleep masks are really comfortable and do help soothe you. So like, you've heard of a weighted blanket
Mhm.
being kind of like a desensitizing type thing that helps you just feel safer. And they make weighted sleep masks. Mike did just find, I think he found, it was like a certain airport that someone had told him about this really great sleep mask that feels so like soft and fluffy that it doesn't feel like he has something on his face, because he's the same way. He can't handle something being on his face. So I can get that for you if you would like, and I'll text
I
that to
can
you or
pay you
message
back
it to
for
you.
sure. Also don't
Right?
want to be a hassle for Mike to be running through
Well,
an
and then when you're
airport.
up in June, we'll just give you. I don't know where he got it. He'll know, but so there's those options too. If like getting window coverings is not immediately available to you right now, that could be an option. But yeah, light at night, that's going to impact things for sure. Because you think about to those days when we had just candlelight everywhere, we also didn't have a problem with people having their porch lights on. And I mean, I guess we had windows, but they probably were like maybe not glass even. So I'm thinking about what the windows would have looked like. But um, yeah, so that is a problem.
That darn neighbor light, tell you what.
Yeah.
I think that's the other questions probably I want to make sure I'm respecting your time. So I can save those for another time.
I'm okay. You can also email them to me. I'm actually okay. I'm actually going to do some coursework today, so I'm flexible. So it's, if
Maybe
your
this
schedule
this
allows
one
it, then
last
I'm okay with it.
maybe just this one last one. I don't know if it'll take too
Okay.
long. Um, I think eczema and asthma are related. I think I mentioned that um I got asthma last fall, and then eczema's been popping up. I'm pretty sure it's eczema. I can't imagine it's anything else. Probably in like the last 5 months. These are all immune system issues, I think. which are usually caused by stress. So have you seen or read anything about the relationship between adrenal glands and eczema and or asthma?
Not necessarily the direct relationship between the two. Um,
I want usually I
Yeah, I'll help you in just a moment,
I
okay?
want Carl's coach.
Okay, we'll put that on next. I'll be right there. Yes, so you haven't seen
it's
super
not,
direct.
it's a roundabout relationship. So what's happening is your immune system is acting up because of something. And this is where I would come back. When you mentioned eczema earlier, I was like, we do need to check into your gut, I think. Like, I think that would actually, it would reduce chronic stress for you. So that is in relationship to the adrenal glands, but that's also the immune system. So I
Mhm.
am wondering if there's, now we have kind of one more symptom pointing to gut health stuff.
Mhm.
So there's not a direct correlation, but you can see how the adrenals would be reacting in stress if there is an unaddressed pathogen. And then that inflames everything. And we're getting things like eczema and asthma.
Yes, yes. That lines up.
And that's
Thank
not always the
you.
case. It comes from other places sometimes, but I would put some money on that horse. So
Very suspicious.
yeah.
Thank you so much for being flexible this morning. Sorry that it
Oh,
was
thank you. No, thank you for
most
being
of the things
flexible.
did say 9 a.m. So I feel like 99% of the communication was 9 a.m. So it was very
No, okay. I will change the other ones to 10. Um, the
I
ones that
can
we
do
talked
9
about.
too. Honestly, it was just because I had 10 in my head. So whatever works best for you is works for me.
I'll change them to 10. I'll meet you there because I really appreciate you meeting me here today. So
Oh, well, happy to
yeah.
do it. I appreciate you.
Okay. Okay. This is great. You can message me any other questions that you have. You can also save them for next time if you want to. But um yeah, this is good. So you'll get the next module on Monday and we'll talk more about blood sugar,
Woohoo!
which you already know most about because we talked about that so much.
That's awesome.
So
I can
yeah.
always use more blood sugar information. I feel like it's big piece. So that's
Yeah.
good.
All right, friend. I'll see you next week.
Yay! Thank you. I
Hey,
hope you
have
go
a
roller
good one.
skating today.
I might actually. It's actually dry enough to do that. So, all right. Yay. See you next
See
time.
you. Bye.
Bye.